That's right. It's a continuation of the I Love Ann show. And, yes, we just had Congressman Trey Gowdy on, and now I've got Congressman Mick Mulvaney here. And I'm so glad to have you here. How you doing today, Mick?
And I'm doing great. How was my friend Harold Watson Gowdy III this morning?
He was on fire.
In fact, he just sent me a text, so.
Okay. Well, listen, lots going on up there, and of course, one of the things that I wanted to just touch base on a little bit was I was reading your letter about why you voted for Boehner.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I thought it was very disappointing to see that, you tried to vote against him a couple of years ago, but then people up there lie.
Politicians lie, apparently. This was news to me, but it was a lesson learned.
And so one of the things that I wanted to discuss with you is, where do you feel, because it has to be from your opinion, where do you feel the Republican Party is? Is it conservative enough? Is it becoming more middle of the road? As we get more progressivism, instead of calling them Democrats, maybe call it progressivism, we seem to be, are Republicans moving a little bit more to the center here? How do you feel things are shaping up?
It depends. It's sort of hard to paint with a broad brush when you've got, only two parties in a country of 300 million people. But I can speak for the new House majority, and we are certainly more moderate than we were in the past. Why is that? If you look at a lot of the seats, we have the largest majority now since the 1920s, I think. And we picked up a bunch of seats this year. Where did we pick those seats up? Excuse me. We picked the seats up in the Midwest and the Northeast. And these are not hardcore conservative places. If you win a congressional seat in New England, it's not going to be the same type of Republican that we have, say, in Georgia, South Carolina, or Texas. So there have been a lot of new Republicans coming to Washington, D.C., who don't agree with me on a lot of things. For example, we just tried to pass a bill banning late-term abortions, and that was shipwrecked in part by these moderate Republicans who are pro-life Republicans. So we have that challenge to deal with. So it's not easy. It is not easy by any stretch of the imagination because we are not a monolithic party. But I do think that the conservative movement is starting to organize better. We talk about that new caucus that a group of us just formed this week in order to try and get conservatives more structure, more organization, more cooperation so that we can combat sort of this move to the center in the party.
Yeah, it just seems like, and the other thing that is very bothersome to me is that Tea Party seems to be a bad word out there. I mean, all you have to do is have somebody on that's a Tea Party person, and you're being attacked from all sides. It's like progressive is just scream the loudest, and you'll make them go away.
No, I'll take that all day. I do not mind when I go on TV if they put Tea Party conservative up there at all. I've joined the Tea Party caucus again this year. I'm more than happy to have that name associated with me because I think it gives me the chance to sort of prove to people who think everybody in the Tea Party is nuts that we're not. What does it mean? It means we're just extraordinarily fiscally conservative and also socially conservative at the same time. It's not a fringe part of the Republican Party. And so I welcome those attempts to try and denigrate the Tea Party because the more attention we get, the more opportunity we have to prove those people wrong.
Sure. Well, yes, but it does seem that is the way to try to shut it down is to scream loudest.
Yeah, that's true. And look, we do face some challenges. John Boehner was on TV last night, a very high-profile interview on Fox.
Yes.
And he's on there with Bret Baier, and Bret asked him the question, what was the message of the November midterm elections? Now, you ask me, and I'm saying that the answer is that the answer to that question is that the message was that it was a wholesale rejection of the president's policies. And what John said was the message was that we have to get along and learn how to find common ground and govern. And listen, that's nice to say, but I don't think that was the message of the midterm elections. But John is saying that because it reflects the majority of the Republicans in Congress right now, and that's what we have to work in.
So how do you think this year is going to shape up as far as the veto power of the president? I mean, we do have the Congress and we have the Senate, but how is it all going to shape up together? What do you think?
Listen, I hope that we have a chance to deal with the president's veto, because all I'm hearing right now out of the Senate is that they can't pass anything because they don't have 60 votes. It's just absurd. We've sent them a relatively minor piece of legislation in the Keystone Pipeline, something that passed with bipartisan support in the House, and they don't think they can pass it out of the Senate. So I've been very disappointed with the language coming out of the Senate over how they don't think they can pass anything because they don't have enough votes. That's not what they told me 6 months ago. What they told me was help elect Republicans to the Senate and we will fix things. So I helped elect Republicans to the Senate. I raised money for Tom Cotton. We were involved in a bunch of different races. Trey and I raised a bunch of money for Tom Cotton down in Kiowa, for example. We helped deliver Republicans to control the Senate. And for now to have them say, oh, but it's not enough, we need the presidency, is so disappointing to me. And the Senate needs to step up and start going out to work to get the votes to pass good pieces of legislation. Right now, it looks like they're willing to sleep their way through the next 2 years.
Well, that is disappointing. That is very disappointing to hear. And, Keystone Pipeline, that was one of the things that was looked at as a big possibility and was supposed to be, I guess we should say, a showdown between the president and a united Congress and Senate.
Yeah. By the way, I want to make one thing clear, is that when I speak to Senate, again, anytime you speak generally like that, you run the risk of sweeping people into that don't belong in that. Tim has done a tremendous job. I know even Lindsay is working over there, and the young members, the new members of the Senate, Tom Cotton, James Langford, Cory Gardner, are over there. They want to work. It seems like it's the men and the women, well, mostly men, but there's women there as well, who have been there for 20 and 30 years are the ones who are more than happy just to do nothing and wait for the next election, and that's what's so frustrating. Another argument, by the way, Ann, for term limits.
I was going to say that goes to your term limits bill. Where is that one at?
Oh, I just met yesterday with a senator. I won't mention his name, who's been there since before I was a teenager. And all I could think of during the meeting was, oh my goodness gracious, this gentleman needs to go home. He needs to retire. I cannot believe he's still here. But that's the Senate of the United States for. Listen, we were one of the great culprits there for a long time, weren't we? How old was Strom when he was elected the last time? 114 or something like that.
Something like that. You're right.
So.
But and the idea that it's just like down here in Columbia. I was asking. I think we had Floyd on the other day about the possibilities of getting tax reform, getting a new tax code down here. We desperately need a whole new one redone down here. And he goes, well, there'll be another election coming up, Ann.
It's great, isn't it?
It is.
Goodness gracious, what a great system. And that's what's so frustrating about Columbia, is that we're now in our, 14th year of Republican in the governor's office, Republican House, Republican Senate, and we still don't have meaningful tax reform. We still don't have meaningful tort reform. We still don't have meaningful school choice. Very frustrating as a Republican and as a conservative to be 14 years into control and still not have. We should be setting the trend, Ann, in South Carolina. We should be on the forefront of things. Other states should not be moving ahead of us when it comes to enacting good conservative legislation. So the fact that we're following there, as with so many things, is very disappointing to me as a conservative and as a Republican.
Yeah, let me ask you something, because there's conversation down here about what we're going to do here, and then I hear that there's a conversation up there. Gas prices are down, so I guess we need to add a gas tax.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan. For me, all this gas tax has much to do about nothing. If as soon as the automotive companies figure out a way to build a good battery, we're not going to buy any gasoline for our cars. And so I think we need to be thinking to the future. There again, another example of how South Carolina, instead of reacting to circumstances, could be proactive and try and find other ways to pay for roads and bridges. At the federal level, I can assure you there's plenty of money. The problem is that more and more of this money every year goes to things like flowers and signs. And don't get me wrong, I love flowers and signs and bike lanes. They're great.
Yeah.
But that's not what the gas tax is intended for. Neither is it intended for bus systems in Charlotte, North Carolina, or Amtrak in the Northeast. That's not what your gas tax money should be going to. And before we start talking about raising any taxes, we talk about how to properly spend the money we have now. Because, again, you and I have talked about this before. I'm one of the Republicans who is not afraid to say this. People don't mind paying their taxes. They just want to know that the money's not being wasted. And it will be a cold day and you know where before I talk about raising taxes, unless we've had this discussion about how we spend the money we already take in. And we are a long way from being able to look people in the eye and say, we spend your tax dollars wisely. Until we have that conversation, it's absurd to talk about raising taxes.
Sure, and you've also just signed on another bill about cutting the federal workforce through attrition. What an idea.
Yeah, no, the federal workforce has grown much faster than the economy, much faster than the country, much faster than private workforce, and certainly wages within the federal workforce have grown much faster than private sector wages. That needs to stop, and so what a friend of mine, Cynthia Lummis from Wyoming, and I did, we've done it the last couple of Congresses, is introduce a bill that says, look, we recognize the fact that no one has the political will to fire anybody, so let's not fire anybody, but let's shrink the size of the government through attrition so that no new agency would be allowed to hire a new person until 3 people leave or retire, and we could slowly start to shrink the size of government that way. It's been interesting to see the reaction of some of my Democrat colleagues, especially who don't care that we're not firing anybody. That's what they don't like. They just don't like the idea of shrinking the size of government. They need that big government base. It's part of their union base now. It's part of their political base. They need federal workers because that's who votes for them. So it's interesting to see politics insert itself into the decisions about how big the government should be.
Sure. And, what do you think about this executive amnesty and where we're going? And will anything push back on that, or is this going to go through? I think that's one of the things most people are most interested in. Where are we going with this?
I think it's the biggest issue right now. I really do. And it's not just because it's immigration. An imperial presidency is dangerous to everybody, Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, Conservative, Progressive. I don't care. An imperial presidency is dangerous for everyone, and I think this is the premier issue right now in Washington, D.C. I don't think we're going to get anything across the president's desk that will pass a veto, but I do think we should put it on his desk and let him know that the elected officials of Congress, Republican and Democrat alike, object to him going around Congress. Dianne Feinstein, a Democrat from California, says she's upset about the president going around Congress on the Corporal Bergdahl prisoner exchange. There are members of his party who are upset about him going around Congress on changing the relationships with Cuba. Are they willing to step up to the plate and pass a piece of legislation that tells the president formally, you can't do that? That's what this debate is about, more than immigration. Even if you like what the president did on amnesty, I don't, but some people did. Even if you like what he did, you should abhor the method in which he did it, because it undoes the rule of law and puts us in the realm of the rule of man, and that is a very, very dangerous place for any of us to be unless we happen to be the man making the laws. So I hope that we continue to fight on it. I don't know what the outcome is going to be, and I'm very disappointed to hear the Senate say that they're not interested even in fighting on it. A group of us sent a letter over yesterday to encourage the Senate to fight. The House passed an amendment, the Mulvaney Amendment, a couple weeks ago, defunding, using the power of the purse to defund the president's executive amnesty. So the House has done what it's supposed to do. The Senate needs to step up, and it will be a very disappointing time if they don't. But it's time for Mitch McConnell to prove that things are different between him and Harry Reid, and this is his chance to do that.
Yeah, well, I know in Congress y'all have those whips that are supposed to whip you guys into shape. What about over in the Senate? Do they have that?
I'm not really sure. The Senate is a different planet, I think. We laugh at Tim. Tim and Trey and Jeff and I are still pretty close. And we always, give him a hard time when we get together for dinner that he has to go home by 7 to go to bed. So Senate is just a different place.
Yeah. Well, I just, you don't hear about any whips over there, do you?
I don't think so.
I don't think they have whips. Okay. Maybe
There's one of my favorite signs, though, down in the basement, if you ever see it, for all the the political junkies who like to come up and sort of walk through the building. There's a great sign in the basement of the Senate office which says, "No running in Senate halls." And I'd just love to get a picture of like John McCain standing in front of that sign, because my guess is it's been a long time since there's been any running in the Senate halls.
You're right. Now, what about this balloon that the administration floated about taxing college savings? The 529
I think that one's dead in the water. In fact, I heard last night, and I can't confirm this, I heard last night that even the president was starting to walk that back. That is a very popular tool for ordinary Americans to save for college. It is not a rich person tool, which is how the president sort of offered it when he first started suggesting taxing it. It's very difficult, I think, even for the president, for whom hypocrisy means nothing, still very difficult even for him to, on one side of his mouth, to say, college is too expensive and I want to make it free, and then in the next sentence say, and I want to tax the way that all of you folks have been saving to pay for your kids' college. So my guess is that is dead. Even if he wanted to pursue it, it would never, ever, ever see the light of day in the House. So for everybody back home who is saving money for their kids or their grandkids through a 529 program, there's a lot of things to worry about in the country. Taxing your 529s is probably not one of them.
What are you most worried about, Mick?
Deficit.
Deficit?
Yeah.
Now
because it doesn't get nearly the attention now that it should.
Yeah, we're up to what, 18 trillion?
Yeah, it was a hot topic for the first 2 years I was there, and then it sort of became less glamorous, less sexy, it doesn't drive ratings anymore. And the bad news about that is that for about 2 years, politicians were actually focused on it because the folks back home made sure that we were focused on it. And that's sort of fallen by the wayside now. I'll give you an example. The border bill that we are talking about right now costs $10 billion. We're not going to pay for it. We are going to exempt ourselves from all of our rules and just borrow money to pay for that. Even if you agree, as I do, that the border needs to be secured, to go even deeper in debt is irresponsible for us. But right now, the attitude in Washington is back to business as usual, sort of, which is deficits don't matter as much as they did a couple of years ago. It's not as bad as it was when the Democrats were in charge a couple of years back, but I hear less and less talk about the deficits. The fiscal hawks, as sort of like myself, have been moved to the back burner for a little bit, and that frightens me because that debt is a I've often said that this country is much more likely to destroy itself from within than to be destroyed from somebody outside, and the deficit is the tool by which that is going to happen. You cannot maintain this debt and this deficit the way that we have, but it's not getting the attention that it should.
And, well, maybe two last questions. What do you think, the president wants to normalize relationships with Cuba and the sanctions on Iran? You know, there's a big conversation about whether there should be or shouldn't. He says, let them do it. What is your feeling being in Congress?
On Cuba, I'll be perfectly candid with you. I don't know how I feel about it yet. I haven't had the time to sort of look through the issues and think about it. I could see both sides of the argument at first blush, so I've not really taken a very definitive position on that. It's not my issue. I didn't follow it very closely before the president took his actions. I know that some folks are very passionate on both sides of it, both within my party and then across the parties in Congress. So I don't know is the answer to that question. I need to take a look at it. On Iran sanctions, I have spent a good bit of time looking at that, and I fear that we are making an existential mistake, and that when a country, as Iran has done, has taken the official position they want to kill 8 million people, which is the population of Israel, and as soon as they acquire the ability to kill 8 million people, they intend to kill 8 million people. I have a theory, Ann, that if you listen to your enemies long enough, eventually they will tell you the truth, and they tell you what they're thinking. And I think Iran is being very clear with the world what they want to do to Israel. And it doesn't make any difference that it's a Jewish nation or a democracy or our ally. If Ghana was taking the position that they wanted to wipe Equatorial Guinea off the map, or Nigeria wanted to get rid of Poland, it doesn't make any difference. We would be reacting as a united front with an outcry across the globe that is 100% unacceptable, and we will do everything in our power to stop you from doing that. I don't know why we're not taking that step with Iran. I don't know why we're sort of soft-playing our position. I don't know why we rolled back sanctions. I think it's a critical mistake by this administration, and I fear that the next administration and the next generation will pay the price.
Well, lots of heavy-duty stuff to go on up there.
Yeah, it's a fun job, isn't it?
Yeah. It just really makes a joke a minute up there, right?
Yeah, now you know why Trey's hair is white like that.
Yeah.
So.
Trey's hair is always a question, you know. I love seeing him on TV or, you know, when he's doing his, with the YouTubes and on the floor. But I tell you what, you never know what you're going to get there.
No, you don't. Did you hear about the TV interview that he turned down last week?
No.
Neither did I.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, like
all
that
right.
I've been using that one, and I hope Gowdy is listening because I use that one as much as I possibly can now.
Well, comedy keeps us sane sometimes, doesn't it? Yeah, it does. Listen, Congressman Mick Mulvaney, always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thanks so much for calling in today.
And thanks very much.
All righty. God bless. Bye-bye.